All right, greetings everyone, and welcome back to the Freedom File. I'm Anthony Mixer, co-host, and today I have a special guest and a good friend of mine who was recently elected to the state Senate here in Washington State and is currently serving in his first legislative session. So please welcome Senator Jeff Wilson. Senator, how are you doing today?
It's great. It's always good to talk with you, Anthony, and look forward to our discussion today.
Of course. So first off, are you enjoying this virtual session that we're having here in Washington?
Well, let's just say I enjoy the challenges. I'm just hoping for happier outcomes. This year has been fraught with challenges brought by the pandemic and, of course, excessive gubernatorial control.
Mm-hmm. Yes. All right. So before we dive into some of our main questions, do you want to give us sort of a brief update on what's going on in Olympia right now that maybe people want to know about?
Yeah, well, right now is the part of the political process in our long session where each of us are reviewing each other's work. In other words, the Senate bills are on the House side, and the House bills that survived are on the Senate side. And we're kind of going over each other's work product. But most importantly is the budget process. Right now, we're beginning to turn out budgets that are operating, a transportation budget and a capital budget. And these are where it's going to get tricky because most things in Olympia always come down to money sooner or later. So we can talk policy, we can talk bills, but ultimately the cause and effect that everybody wants to know is the outcome of the budget process.
Right. So we'll get into some financial questions pretty soon, but you took out an incumbent Democrat, Dean Tacko, or as we like to call him, Dean Taxco, because he was pushing for the gas tax mainly. So what should that say about what the direction of the 19th legislative district is heading?
Well, I think I'm a result of really what the people wanted, and that's the beauty of elections is they chose my style and my ideals to represent them versus the former incumbent who had a number of successes but may not have been headed down the path that the 19th and the constituents wanted them to. You'd mentioned a gas tax. They're highly unpopular, and of course, I keep no secrets about how I am no to the gas taxes.
Right. So, of course, the Senate passed the capital gains income tax. As most of us know, this is against the state constitution. So where do you see this heading as it sits in the House now awaiting debate?
Well, this is like a slow motion nightmare that you're evolving with daily. It didn't just get through the Senate very easily. It was a one vote passage onto the House. I, of course, was without hesitation an absolute no. And the disrespect of the tax comes with an obvious statements. For example, this would have been the 10th or the 11th time that we've said no. I mean, no means no to an income tax. So since 1934, there's been some attempts to do what we know we're not supposed to do, and that's violate our Constitution with an income tax. I don't have any other way to explain it except this year's legislation is trying to not necessarily circumvent it, but to try it one more time.
Yeah.
We know there's going to be a court challenge. And if our emergency clause sticks, then that would remove the voice of the voters. And shame on everybody for even implying that a capital gains tax is not an income tax. It's definitely an income tax that we don't want.
Because the IRS said so in a letter to Representative Dan Newhouse.
And they'll say it again. This one is, it's really that it's not an income tax on a certain group of income earners. Don't consider it that way. Consider it a foot in the door for future legislation to enact income taxes on any and all brackets. And we've said no, despite how our existing tax system is attacked constantly. The gains in the income tax is an absolute no-no. It's a disrespect to the voter. So with me, my marching orders are loud and clear. It's no. And now that we've seen some fiscal returns, it's been proven quite clearly you don't need an income tax. Now, they may want one, but we certainly don't need one.
No. So I do want to touch on something specific. I think you mentioned this. This legislation intends to target those who make over $250,000 per year, I believe. Now, Senator Brad Hawkins mentioned something similar to what I'm about to say here, but the fact that at some point Democrats will want to lower the bracket because state government's not making enough because of the already bloated government we have, and people who make this kind of money would probably start trickling out of the state.
Yeah, it's instead of listening, Anthony, to the screams and the yelling, tax the rich, go get those rich. Remember, an income tax is an income tax. And there is absolutely and would be nothing to keep that tax from being cast upon low-income earners, middle-income earners, instead of their favorite target, which is tax the rich. And we need to have a talk about the rich. The rich, without profiling such, they have the means and the wherewithal to sell and monitor and somewhat control their gains income, or to hire and to surround themselves with professionals to help them with tax brackets. The rest of us would never have such protection or affords. We need to just continue to say no to the tax.
Exactly. So you didn't mention the revenue forecast. It came out and it shows that the government is making an additional $3.3 billion, if I read that correctly. And of course, we were supposed to tank based on projections when COVID first hit, and it was closed down. So describe how well you see the state doing with all this positive news amid a crisis like this.
Yeah, can you imagine? It's like you said, Anthony, about a year ago, we were as much as $8 billion in the hole. And just a year later, well, what's happened? We're not only are we past that point of being acceptable, we're surplus. In other words, we've made up this difference, and that's from a number of sources. Real estate sales have been maintained very high, which has kicked into the state coffers. Car sales have been good, and through the pandemic, we've been very fortunate that our sales taxing type process works very well even during a pandemic. But I'll offer this. Could you only imagine if all of the restaurant workers and hospitality workers were working at 100% of their levels, how much more surplus or additional revenue we had? This is great fiscal news that we have for the budget, but we're not even letting all of our contributors contribute, such as those workers. So not only is it good when we get past a phase 3 or 4 or whatever it is, we get to have those that aren't working go back to work and contribute, and we will be that much better off.
Right, and I think we're supposed to be making an additional $5.2 billion over the next 4 years.
Yeah, there's no secret, and we have a constitutional mandate to balance our budget. Please don't let anybody tell you that our budgets are not balanced and that we must have this money. Again, it's very careful. We want this money, but we don't need this money. We can function and provide the services that government needs to, and then some, with the existing funds that have been earned through our sales tax collection system.
Especially when you got the government so much bigger since Jay Inslee's been in office.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. Our spending continues to go up each year, and it seems the number one industry that just grows like a really bad chia pet is the state government.
Yes.
We tend to add more government jobs instead of a private sector, and that in itself is an imbalance, Anthony.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so we do have to discuss this. The Ninth Circuit Court has ruled that states may restrict the open carrying of guns in public, citing that it is not constitutional to open carry. And that does affect us here in Washington State. So what are your thoughts on this?
Well, we had legislation here recently, which again I voted against, that was to ban the open carry at permitted public events, for example, at the Capitol. And obviously, it seems we're legislating off a lot of emotions. In other words, to some people, just the sight to see a firearm, not hidden, but to actually see it on display or to the outside of one person's body is enough to be obviously dramatic enough where we needed to legislate it. I'll offer to you that the Second Amendment is one of our most precious offerings that keeps us unique to many countries around the world, and we should never surrender that right. We should always focus on gun responsibility, but our right to bear arms it's right after our right to talk about it, which is the First Amendment. So the First and Second Amendments they're the top of the list.
Because the Second Amendment protects every other amendment.
Absolutely, and it's a day that I know that we may need to address gun legislation. Of course we do, just like we do with a number of things from time to time. But we must continually ask ourselves, is it in fact constitutionally protected? Because that's our DNA of our entire state. That's who we are, and that's who we need to be.
Exactly. All right, so one of the things I hear about often is the government is always finding racial disparities in nearly every single issue. I mean, what can you say? Even with the transmission of the virus, even. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. They're even finding in school reopenings. So what are your thoughts on this?
Well, as a legislature, everything we do needs to have some kind of consideration to fairness. And that's fairness whether it's mechanical or whether it's social. And naturally, equity is important. Equity is important if we strive for equality. However, we need to give ourselves some credit once in a while, Anthony. We still have the 14th Amendment of the United States of America, and that alone sets a standard. What I'm saying is we do have standards in place, and we need to honor those and recognize the existing ones. However, this year's legislation seems to focus a lot on equity of social parts of our community that may be either oppressed or for some ways impacted negatively. But there is a fairness that needs to be applied, and we're struggling with that right now. It's a very challenging topic, and as you know, it's highly emotional.
Yeah.
You just bring up the discussion of social equity, and you're sure to get a lively discussion on the topic.
Yeah. So now when it does come to economic issues, I often hear, I've heard it in Olympia too, that minorities need more government help to be successful. Just to give a short paraphrase on the details that the Democrats like to give when arguing this position. So why can't it be that government just gets off the people's backs, and no matter their ethnicity or race, and just let the free market capitalism roll with what's been doing for the past 240 years in this country?
Absolutely. We are a land of opportunity, and we need to embrace and speak more of that. We need to speak about, well, what does it mean to be here in America and in Washington State? There is opportunity all around us, and the government is to facilitate that, but not to be the one that actually takes it from start to finish, because that's too much government. Challenges in a capitalistic society where people first should want more or want to improve or to be successful, and that is a personal drive. You can't have the government instill personal drive or even ethics into you. It still has to come from within. But I will offer that I'm proud of Washington State's ability to offer opportunity to everybody. It's when right now it seems we're trying to balance something forcibly versus just to provide the path, and as you said, get government out of the way. We have the means and the ability to promote all people of all types, and it's the melting pot kind of mentality that I think that we were taught once in school, but for some reason we don't talk about that. The United States is already built upon this, and we should embrace that. But at this point now, we're legislating favorites and other groups against others, and heaven forbid you ever forget somebody, because that's the worst part of a legislature, a well-meaning intention, but you leave a group out. That's something that concerns me. Nobody should be left out.
And you saw this in Oakland, where they're giving money to ethnic groups except whites who are in poverty, and that's playing favorites too.
Yeah, well, we are a sanctuary state. We Seattle has also led the way in a sanctuary
Yes.
city, and in doing so, the immigration topic alone is one that should involve not just the beautiful state of Washington, but the other 49 states. And as we can see, we have a new administration now, and it's somewhat ironic that there are growing problems on our borders now versus shrinking, and yet we tend to legislate we're not promoting it, but we're certainly not supporting the system, I would say, very strictly on immigration. And immigrants are needed to our economy. I mean, the United States has always been a welcoming area where we need immigrants to meld in with us in our workforce and to become part of our overall American culture. But it seems nowadays we're spending more time trying to cancel culture versus embrace the culture that's already within us, as in with the melting pot. I think that's something we just don't brag about enough.
Yeah. Well, I'll ask you more about the southern border here shortly, but we're going to dive into a few federal issues now. The first one being election integrity. It is a big issue surrounding the 2020 election, and many have lost faith in our election systems now. So how do you perceive what's going on with elections, especially when a lot of people think that Trump actually won, but that the Democrats stole the election?
And for those that believe that, I don't believe I can argue them away from that, and nor would I want to. But the message I'd like to give to you today, Anthony, and your viewers, is that don't give up that faith that you've now lost. If you surrender the faith and the hope in our elections now, then in an indirect way you've let the opposing side win. I tell people constantly, please don't give up. Now, there are ways when you're insecure about how your vote is being counted or whatnot. There are a number of ways now that we can do to ensure that your voice is heard properly. Hand deliver your ballot. Follow up to make sure your ballot's received. There are a number of things that just filling out your ballot shouldn't stop your responsibility to make sure that ballot is counted.
Yeah.
And we do have some issues with election integrity, and we'll always have, of course, foreign interference.
Yeah. Do you believe that we should keep mail-in voting in this state?
I am a supporter of mail-in voting, only under the auspice that it's not the only way. In other words, mail-in voting should be an option and still should be promoted, but there's nothing else than the good old-fashioned way than to hand deliver your ballot and to ensure the receipt of that. If you want that comfort, that should be granted to you. So I'm not for really necessarily saying yes or no to that. I want to provide options that the voter is comfortable with in ensuring that their ballot matters or is counted.
Yeah, and of course, I believe we all should believe that absentee mail-in balloting should still be kept, especially for the military. So now we're going to get to the southern border. I know that this isn't really a major topic here because we border Canada, but with the high surge of migrants on the southern border, how do you see this as an absolute failure of the Biden administration?
Well, there's immigration of opportunity, Anthony, and that's exactly what you're seeing right now. At least the past month in March and February, you're seeing a large insurgence of minors, unaccompanied minors, and they didn't just all show up at once. There's a lot of pre-calculated strategy as to how do you enter this country and, of course, stay in this country. And this is a very solid way to do it. An unaccompanied minor is not subject to automatic shipping back and things like that. So let's just say I would go on record as saying there are a number of people that are taking advantage of our openness at our border right now, and that's not how it was intended to be.
They should go through merit.
They not only merit, but the process to come to our country is a very important thing, and we should be a welcoming country, but you have to follow those steps. And there's where the confusion gets. It seems it's been the number one topic almost of presidential debates, and yet nobody seemed to figure it out. I don't think we have to figure it out that much. when you come to the United States of America, we want to welcome you, but there are certain steps like, are you going to be a burden? Are you able to care for yourself? Do you have family here? Or is in fact the United States of America going to be the foster family of the entire world without restrictions? And we know that that can't happen. We have to have a balance of restrictions, and that includes consequences. It's not supposed to be okay to simply walk into somebody else's country and not have a consequence to that if you do it the improper way.
Yeah, it's not just going through the customs, you know.
Absolutely.
Exactly. So last question now. I want to talk about young people and their involvement in politics. We're seeing this all across the country where more young people are getting involved in politics, more so than I think this country has ever seen before. Many tend to think young people tend to side with the liberals, but we're seeing a lot of young conservatives actually. So what can you say to encourage young people who are getting involved, whether to be in activism or running for office?
You know, as far as the young people, the legislature's done a number of steps to capture that we ensure that when you turn 18, you'll be registered to vote.
Yes.
And I think that that's really good. I'm still amazed how much effort the government promotes to voters to kind of nudge them along to do what I was excited to do when I became eligible to vote. Voting is fun, but the government has had to convince people that, especially young people, that you need to get out and vote. Yeah. I look forward to hearing the new voices, but I wish that your vote comes with a little bit of responsibility, Anthony, and that is understand the issues, take the time to do a little research, and don't get all of your news from social media. That may not be your best source, but I ask that young voters, to me, are still a student in some form or another. I want them to do some homework before they vote, rather than just look at a ballot and pick off some names and jump with a party or something that they've seen that was popular. There's more to it, because everything that they vote for is going to end up, they're going to have to live with those consequences of the election.
Exactly. Well, Senator, thank you for joining us today. We really do appreciate it. Is there any more thoughts that you want to add before we close?
No, I appreciate this time, Anthony. Continue to get the word out, and I want to tell everybody that hope is something that we need to promote. And I'm glad that we're talking politics more on the street level. I think that's important, and the change is going to come back in our favor.
Exactly. Well, Senator, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, sir.
And to our audience, thank you for joining us. Have a great day.